Dr. Stanley Krippner has dedicated his life to studying psychology, parapsychology, and consciousness studies. By traveling the world and conducting research on dreams, ESP, and other fantastic phenomena, he witnessed for himself the interaction between science, art, and spirituality.
He stood at the forefront of this field of consciousness studies and met a whole lot of really interesting people. Today we'll be talking with Dr. Krippner about his most amazing experiments and experiments throughout what he called his chaotic life, which is also the title of his new book.
Join me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, and professional remote viewer John Vivanco for a metaphysical show that's out of this world. Dr. Krippner, we really appreciate you being with us today. You're a star on our show. We've looked into the Maimonides lab and all of the experiments that you've done, and it's amazing how much the work that you've done has actually changed the world. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's very gracious of you. Our Maimonides work was summarized in a popular book, Dream Telepathy, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary. And those experiments in dream telepathy held up very well. They've been replicated in a number of laboratories. And so I'm so happy that that work has continued to inspire and inform people. One of the impacts of that work is to allow people to have conversations about dreams that come true, dreams about another person, without feeling that they're crazy. This is actually part of the mainstream experience in dreams. These unusual dreams happen all the time.
Yes.
You know, Doctor, I've got to say, so I've been on the application side in remote viewing for over 25 years in a professional capacity. Because of your work, I have incorporated dreams and tasking remote viewing to get information out of our dreams, which has been incredibly successful as a methodology. It was you really who pioneered that whole realm and you opened it up to get people to think outside of a box and to utilize that deep subconscious in order to get information on things, not just telepathy, but information out in the real world to help solve problems.
Well, thank you for sharing your personal experience. This is the type of report I've been getting from time to time, and many people who read our book or read the scientific articles are very relieved because they realize they're not the only ones who have these unusual dreams. There's out-of-body experiences during dreams. There are dreams about distant times and places that are verified. So dreams are really a conduit to a very universal unconscious that all of us can participate in.
I find the statement that you just said on the out-of-body side really interesting, really fascinating. Now, like a lot of the experiments that you did were on telepathy and information, right? And trying to create a situation where other researchers would try to prove your point, which is very successful. Now, have you tried anything in the realm of out of body on the research scientific side?
Well, actually, there's been a great deal of research done on the so-called out-of-body experience. We did a classic experiment on that topic at Maimonides. This goes back several decades. Charles Hart had done a research study in his laboratory where he had a young woman try to get out of her body and read a number that had been posted on a ledge upside her bed. And she was correct. She was able to do this. However, There are some shortcomings to that experience because Park knew the number and he was also running the experiment. So we replicated that study, and we did not use a number, we used a picture. We thought that would be more dreamlike. And the person who put the picture on the ledge had no contact with the dreamer during the course of the night. The dreamer tried 3 times, and bingo, on the 3rd time, he claimed to be out of his body, and he said the picture is a picture of a sunset. And this is exactly correct. He painted with perspectives on a perfect sunset. The question, of course, is what happens in an out-of-body experience? It could be this is a type of remote viewing or clairvoyance, and the person dreams it as an out-of-body experience because that is more suitable for their attempt. Or it could be that part of their psyche actually is projecting out of the body and then thankfully comes back in. So these are some of the theoretical and research issues that are still being studied by several laboratories who are taking an interest in these so-called out-of-body experiences.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting, because that's what I was thinking while you were speaking about that. Is the information, the way the person relays the information, perceives the information, going to be different than in the dream? For instance, in the out-of-body state, could it be more physically representational versus the dream state could be more metaphorical, right? And more blended with other things? Was there a difference in how the information was received to an out-of-body person versus a dream person? The out-of-body person, was it more pure physical representational versus the dream could be more metaphorical?
Well, of course, this is a very good research question because most studies of out-of-body experiences do not take place in the dream laboratory. Some people who have undertaken a discipline to have that experience can do that when they're wide awake. They simply rest in a comfortable chair and do the so-called projection. Ingo Swann was the founder of the term remote viewing, but I was with him one night where he attempted to have an out-of-body experience and go on a trip to the planet Mars. That is really a stretch of the imagination. And who knows? What gives this some validity is that on one of his experiences, he went to the planet Jupiter and detected some features of Jupiter that had not previously been noted by astronomers. They came up with the description that matched Ingo's description of what he had done out of the body. So, using the term out of body could be a metaphor for something else that's going on. I think the important thing here is to note that humans have more potentialities and more resources than their cultures give them permission to utilize or to manifest.
I totally agree with you, and it's something I think that needs to continue being studied in order for us to come to better conclusions on what's happening. I'm curious to know, Dr. Krippner, I saw in one of your interviews that you mentioned before you got into leading up Maimonides' lab, you had several anomalous experiences in your life that led you to that point. Why did you spend so much of your life working on experiments to prove that there was more to the human psyche than we can grasp?
Well, I don't think I have had more experiences of this type than anybody else. But in my case, they stimulated me to try to find a scientific rationale. When I was about 13 years of age, I had a very strange presentiment that my Uncle Max had died. My Uncle Max is in his 40s. He's in perfect health. And then I heard my mother scream, and I ran to the telephone and said, "What's the matter? Your Uncle Max has just died of a heart attack." That experience led me to do some reading in the popular press. I mean, let's face it, this is back in the 1940s. But I was not interested in the sensationalized fictional accounts. I was interested in the scientific studies that were done. And this led me to discover that there was scientific work going on at Duke University in the United States. So, of course, I pursued those reports, never realizing that a few decades later, I would be able to visit Duke University, I'd be able to visit London, and I'd be able to publish in both of their journals. When somebody has an experience like this, one can dismiss it as irrelevant or even scary, or one can take a very superstitious point of view and say, "Oh, these are demons at work, we stay away from that stuff." No, that doesn't interest me. I've always been interested in terms of trying to find a scientific explanation for these unusual experiences. One thing that I remember from my childhood, my father told me that when he was a boy, he had warts, W-A-R-T-S, and he cut a potato in half and put the potato head on the warts and then buried the potato, and the warts disappeared. Well, this is my first introduction to the power of the psyche and how it can affect bodily functions. And this led to my interest in hypnosis, because much the same thing can be done with hypnosis in terms of addressing different types of somatic issues and problems. My mother told me the neighbor had looked up to the skies and she had seen an oasis. It looked like something from the Middle East. And I did some research later and found out, yes, this is possible. When the atmosphere is just right and when the reflection is just right, somebody can see strange images in the sky that more or less correspond to a distant reality. Experiences like this from my childhood really stimulated me to try to find a scientific explanation. Fortunately, I had very good science teachers both in high school and in college, and so they gave me the grounding that I later used in doing scientific research in anomalous phenomena. Again, people who have these experiences, I would urge to write up their experiences. You can go to a website on the internet that's engineered by Dr. Sandy Rosenberg, and he has a collection and a website where people can exchange those experiences. So there is no longer any reason for people to feel alone or unusual or bizarre. No, these experiences are part of the human condition, and they can share these experiences with other people, even from distant countries.
Did you run into a lot of opposition from your colleagues in studying this when you were at the medical center at universities?
I did not have a great deal of opposition because the particular path that I took when I was studying psychology, I simply did not mention this interest to my psychology professors. I knew I would not get much sympathy, so I just did not bring this up at all. Instead, I became a member of the Parapsychological Association, the British Society for Psychical Research, and those are groups of like-minded people interested in science who share that information. Now, of course, eventually, I did get some criticism. Interestingly enough, came from Wikipedia. They went to great extents to say that our work in dream telepathy was not replicated, which is a lie. Of course, it's been replicated. My work with psychics led them to hoodwink me because I was naive. Again, not true. I've made no claims that should not be verified. Life goes on. We are getting more positive reports than negative reports, especially thanks to the work of the Institute of Noetic Sciences and some of the research they're doing now by Dean Radin and others. Very sophisticated, uses insights from quantum physics, and it is so tight and well controlled. I've yet to see any rational criticism of this work. So very slowly, things are changing a bit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. They are doing a lot of great work. They're doing a lot of great work there. A question I have is there any area that you feel deserves more attention or study out of all of this stuff that you've ever worked on? Is there something that people really haven't gone into yet on the research side that you feel needs to be gone into?
Well, that's a very good question. Past life experiences really deserve more attention than they've gotten. When I first became interested in the field, I made a special visit to see Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, who had begun to do some scientific studies of people with past life memories. And he came up eventually with several hundred cases, mainly children, where he was able to take the reports and go to the neighborhoods where they claimed that they had lived before and do some verification. This was so radical at the time, even mainstream parapsychologists are staying away from that particular topic. But now the evidence is so strong, and the Journal of Humanistic Psychology plans to do a special issue on studies that people have made of children who remember so-called past lives and how those reports have been verified, saying, well, the children are making this up to get attention. The parents are just making this up to get attention. Well, why would they need attention when the culture as a whole is not really very sympathetic to this topic? Many people feel that it violates their religious or their philosophical assumptions. Right now, I'm involved with a study of a young girl who claims that in a past life, she was a young woman who was a personal friend of mine. When I heard about this, oh my God, I said, this is just exactly what I would expect this friend of mine to do from the other side if she were going to make an appearance again. Just in character for her to be dramatic. She was such a drama queen in this life. Now she's going to be a drama queen from the other side. So this study is ongoing. And of course, this young girl had no contact with this late friend of mine. And she is coming up with some very specific information, especially how this young woman and her family escaped the Holocaust because they were Jewish in the Nazi era in Germany. So this is a fascinating topic. Yes, I think this deserves more attention. Some people are jumping the gun and they're saying, well, this is preordained. The soul knows exactly why they want to come back from a past life and reincarnate, and this is part of a grand design. That's too mystical for me. I think that it's more of a chance occurrence. Somebody from the other side might see a loophole in the veil, so to speak, and jump through it to make an effect. From our point of view in this life, we try to use rational reason to figure out these things. We have no idea what's going on at the other side. They might have reasons of their own.
You brought up the Institute of Noetic Sciences a couple of times, and I found a experiment recently from the Institute of Noetic Sciences that really piqued my interest. There was an astronaut who was also involved in NASA, and in outer space, he decided to do some experiments where he would assign a number to some Zener cards and then think about what number that he wanted his friends on Earth, who he assigned one of these symbols to see on Earth. And telepathically, this actually worked more times than not when he was communicating this from outer space, from hundreds of thousands of miles away from the Earth. And his take home on this was that ESP, this idea of telepathy, transcends time and space in a way, because if the hundreds of thousands of miles of Earth, or between Earth and where he wasn't necessarily a factor, and some of the times that he was doing this were outside of the times that he arranged with them on Earth, meaning there was some prophetic part of this or part of their being that was picking up on some of the stuff that he was sending out either before or after he did these things. So it was a very interesting experiment, and I wonder what your thoughts on that are.
Yes, you're talking about the experiment that Edgar Mitchell did.
That's right.
When he was in the moon. Edgar Mitchell is a dear friend of mine. I'm sorry he's no longer with us. He had the brilliant idea of doing ESP tests, telepathy tests, when he was on the moon. Happy to say IONS is now going strong. It not only runs experiments, it has webinars, seminars for people, has a large membership. It's become a very, very vital force in this particular field. You go to Wikipedia and look up IONS, and they downplay it, they diss it, this is all pseudoscience. Again, you cannot trust Wikipedia when it comes to this area, sad to say.
Yeah.
Because
We actually call it Fakeopedia, because the way that Wikipedia works is that it's whoever has the loudest voice and whoever has the biggest opinion, or like, let's say there's several people with a certain opinion, those people will win out over facts 9 times out of 10. So if somebody has, a specific problem with these types of parapsychological experiments, they can simply update the Wikipedia page. And if enough people support that idea, then Wikipedia will support that post. So you actually, for everybody at home listening right now, you really can't trust Wikipedia on a lot of these topics to give you accurate information. You need to be looking elsewhere and doing your own research.
Well, I like your term, Fakeopedia. It's not only parapsychology that they have a bias against, it's alternative healing, alternative medicine that they cannot take.
Very true.
And of course, I agree that one has to be very cautious when one is dealing with one's health. Lots of studies show the effectiveness of the so-called energy medicine, the so-called tapping medicine. Of course, this is unusual, but look at the studies, look at the facts, and you can see that it actually works for many people. Wikipedia is not the only source that people can go to get information about some of these topics. They can go to the IONS website, for example. They can go to various energy medicine websites, for example. So they don't have to automatically go to Wikipedia when it comes to some of these topics.
There's a lot of discussion as to whether or not the types of experiments that you've run have, been accurate and all of these kinds of things. And personally, I think that you're in a weird spot, because you have science who's going to criticize those experiments, and then you have people on the spiritual side, some of them who are very attached to a religious idea, that may criticize those experiments as well. If it doesn't fit in with people's notions, sometimes they have a really hard time accepting what could be the truth, and then it limits us as a human society. It limits our culture, as you said. One thing that I noticed in your work is that you went over to China at a certain period of time. And while you were over in China and you were finding these amazing children that had abilities that were very difficult to explain, at a certain point, it got the attention of the Chinese Communist Party, and then they ended up shutting down as much as they could of this, because it didn't align with their theories, their very atheistic theories on how life and society should be run. And I know that some of those scientists actually still ended up talking to you in secret, even though that was very dangerous for them at the time, especially because of, as you know, the Great Cultural Revolution and all of those things. First of all, it's amazing. All the stuff you found, the children with these abilities, the Qigong and all of that stuff, and what it can do for the human body. What do you think that we can learn from that? And how can we bring some of that information over here to the West even more?
Well, frankly, I think you've put the case very, very succinctly and very well. There is so much potential in our mind, in our body, that has not been fully realized. And I think that these so-called borderline areas of investigation have very, very practical implications, both for our healing, taking care of our body, and for our well-being, taking care of our psyche. One thing, to be very, very specific, is that there was a massive experiment done a few years ago on people who were suffering from depression. And one group of people took antidepressant medication. Another group of people were treated by hypnosis. After a year of studying, the people who were hypnotized actually did a little bit better than the people who were suffering from depression and took medication. Bottom line is that there are alternatives to people getting hooked on medication. There's alternatives that involve mind-body relationships, which are now part of the scientific literature. You can look at hypnosis literature, meditation literature, mindfulness literature, psychedelic literature, and you find a number of routes for mental and physical health that need to be more thoroughly explained. Is that psychedelics are being used to treat mental illness. Very, very tricky. Psychedelics are very unpredictable. They have to be carefully administered by trained guides in a very quick and efficient way, much better than some of the medications that are available. Again, I have nothing against medication. People with PTSD that I know can be so traumatized they can barely function. So anything that will help them, I'm all in favor of. But let's expand the options.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, I actually worked for a coaching company that helped members of the military and people dealing with major addiction to kind of work their way off of their addictions, or in this case, their PTSD. Some of them had real, very difficult PTSD from being on something like 16 tours out in Afghanistan. One of the options through this company was medications, new medicines that they were experimenting with in psychedelics. And I have to say, I was not a person who believed in these types of things. And after seeing and listening to some of these Navy SEALs tell me about what they went through, what their experience was like, and then how this helped them just get back on track, I have to say I was really shocked. And it changed me. It changed my ideas about how these things work and what could be considered medicine and whatnot. And some of those experiences were quite super normal. They were not normal experiences to listen to them telling you this. And they didn't even believe in things before they took these medications. This interview with Dr. Krippner has been pretty fantastic. If you'd like to watch more with the three of us, you can access bonus content on the metaphysical.tv. Check out some of the highlights from that right now.
It's to emphasize the importance of working with PTSD nightmares, because if you can get the nightmares to change, everything else will fall into place.
Managing remote viewing projects and remote viewers, the electromagnetic side can have a huge impact.
Dreams are a wonderful thing, and they can come to assistance in healing, but sometimes they need a little bit of help. We live in an electromagnetic matrix.
What are some of the strangest things that you saw that stumped you that are still with you to this day that you think about often?